Welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast, which exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations. I'm John Frank, fellow entrepreneur and the owner of Third Road Management. And with this podcast, we will connect with a variety of experienced and dynamic individuals to shed some light on both the art and science of entrepreneurship. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. First, my very own Third Road Management, a company that brings fractional CFO services to small and mid-sized organizations by revolutionizing the CFO suite. We'd also like to thank Two Hound Red, a brewery and restaurant located in Glen Ellen, Illinois, that is focused on creating classic, innovative beer and food. And finally, we'd like to thank NWC Media, which provides inbound marketing technology, project workflow management, and efficiency consulting to organizations of varied sizes, who is also the producer of the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast. All right, Ryan Kunkel, welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast by Third Road Management. Looking forward to this. It's going to be a good time. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is episode 4, just so you know. And I always like to explain out of the gates, sort of the mission, why are we doing this? What's kind of the focus of it? But the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations, right? So, you've been an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but there's all these people that sort of like are in and around that are subject matter experts in their, respective fields. And the hope is that this is a valuable forum for people to be inspired and learn from and, take, little pieces of information from other people and be able to use them and apply them. And so that's why we're here. So
Appreciate the opportunity to join.
all right, awesome. So thematically for today, I had a couple of things that I wanted to hit on, just big picture items connected to, you sharing a lot of your story with me. I think the first time we talked was maybe a couple of winters ago during COVID. You and I had our first conversation, like professional one, obviously on the paddle courts or whatever, different conversations, right? But I think Andy was the first one to introduce us, and we just kind of started sharing background stories and things like that. And, so the two thematic wins that I thought of with respect to the conversation with you that I took away from our initial conversation, the first being dream big and act small, or execute small, if you prefer to think of it that way. Because I'm not going to get into it because I want you to get into it, but the whole idea of like having these big ideas and like willing them into existence kind of thing that I took away from you, I thought was like incredibly powerful and fun and all that kind of stuff. And then the other part of it too is just, having a purpose-driven mindset with respect to what you're doing. So like, I think that those two things are going to be like big wins coming out of this in terms of people hearing from you and your story and what they can take away from it. So, all right, I'm not going to ruin any more fun. But what I'd love for you to do is unpack a little bit, maybe to start, tell us about you, sort of progression, maybe from school, because you are an Illini, go Illini.
ILO.
ILO, INI, baby. You're a fellow Illini, but maybe from that point, or even if you want to start in college or whatever, what has been the progression? I know you've had a few steps along the way, but let's start there. And then I know I've got a couple of different areas I want to sort of like go deeper on, but in your own words, a little overview of your background.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a traditional entrepreneurial background. I never considered going into business. I never considered entrepreneurship. I came from a family of educators. And so I have a undergraduate degree in natural resources and environmental sciences.
Okay.
And then I went on to grad school to get a master's in public health, dramatically different career path. And that was the path that I was going on. And to be candid, I stumbled into entrepreneurship. I stumbled into business, and clearly, life leads us in mysterious ways. And I found my calling. I found my passion. And so I'll back up a little bit and kind of fill the gap. So I had a master's in public health. I was um, doing environmental health related activities, writing grants, teaching environmental health courses for juniors and seniors. And I thought for a hot minute that's what I'd spend the rest of my life doing.
Like as a professor? Or
Adjunct faculty was
okay.
my technical uh, as a 23-year-old, a recent a grad. I was asked to stay on as faculty and was working in environmental health as well. And then my brother-in-law went to school for entrepreneurship, knew he would always worked for himself, had that bug that you typically hear about with a lot of the more well-known entrepreneurs. And he had an idea. He had this idea to launch an event uh, based off the TV show The Amazing Race, to do a one-day version of that in different cities. And I naively asked him, "How can I help?" And and just being opportunistic and always looking for fun new ways to get involved and be helpful. I've always been full of curiosity,
Yeah.
and I think that trait ultimately has led to a lot of opportunities for me. And so uh, my brother-in-law did what he does. He launched the business, launched a website, and sure enough, people showed up. And while the brand was beautiful and customers were there, there were a few gaps in the plan.
Yeah.
And how we were going to execute that event that he sold um, had some holes in it, and I quickly found myself on the fly, plugging all sorts of holes, hustling around, and um, complementing what he did
Right.
as a visionary very well. With I like to consider myself an entrepreneurial operator.
Okay.
I can take ideas and turn them into reality. I can build teams. I can monetize the concepts. I can be a filter. And so that was the first time that I ever had the opportunity to do that. And so that
So that was what's what was it Red Frog
that
events then,
that
or did it become Red
yeah.
Frog events?
So that was the spark. That was the beginning.
Okay.
And so I was still going down this other path, a more traditional career path, utilizing my college degree. And then I started kind of have a side hustle, as the kids say these days.
Yep.
And nights and weekends, I'd fly out to different cities to help my brother-in-law execute and build a platform, an event company. And we had one single event at the time. And after doing that for about a year, I joined him in a full-time capacity. And
Yep.
so then I officially partnered with him to really build, scale, and build on the momentum that we had. And then we ultimately decided a few days after committing my time exclusively towards that opportunity, we then took the concept, which was just the Great Urban Race LLC at the time. We realized that we had a platform to create all sorts of different experiential concepts. And so we rebranded the company as Red Frog Events. And then from there, we birthed a handful of brands, many companies. Some were extraordinarily successful and some were absolute failures. And I learned just as much from the failures as I have from the successes, arguably more, actually.
Right. Nothing ventured, nothing gained,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
And we'll drill down a little bit here in a minute, but like some of those brands I know under Red Frog was what were some of those events so that anybody listening can sort of like draw the lines there.
Sure. Yeah, so the first event was called the Great Urban Race, which is the urban scavenger hunt that I referenced. And then uh, and then we spawned a new concept called Warrior Dash, and it was the first ever national obstacle racing series that took running off of pavement off of out of city parks and brought it onto private property and made it just as much about the experience as it was about the competition itself. And it seems so commonplace. Everyone's heard of color runs or tough mudders or Spartan races. We
Yep.
were the first to pioneer the entire experiential running space. And so I know the founders of all those other events that I just referenced. They were all um, fast followers based off the success that we saw. And it was a boom. As right as social media was exploding, people were looking for content for their own personal brands, and and we hit it. We were early adopters to Facebook marketing, which, you know, the foundation of every marketing strategy today, and these things that are so commonplace. But when we pioneered this concept, it was so bizarre that we
Yeah.
weren't able to get insurance for it. And
Lloyd's of London was called,
we,
yeah.
I, I don't know if we want to go this path this quickly, but the only way we were able to get a permit for our first event was by applying for a wedding permit for a very large wedding that we were hosting that day. But that was the only way, and I think some of that um, creative problem solving are how you take these concepts and ultimately bring it to life. You know, if it was done before, um, you know, it wouldn't require the leap that so many of these opportunities have required.
I did not know that part of it, that
Yeah.
prior to that one, that was the first of its kind.
We,
And I mean, I don't know, we
yeah,
can go on and on, but the creativity had just been like, hey, let's go do that. Like,
yeah. And and so
why not, right? Don't people want to get
yeah.
beat up even more when they run? And you know what I mean?
Exactly, to push people outside their comfort zone. So Warrior Dash was our first mega success that kind of it became the largest running series in the U.S. at the time, and was really the catalyst to what we were able to become the ninth fastest growing company in the United States at one point. And from there, we launched a bunch of other concepts. Like I said, most of them failed. Never launch a running series called Epic Fail, which
Yeah.
was a play on Double Dare. But guess what? It was an epic fail. But we did a bunch of other events. And then our next big success and our next big home run was a major music festival on the East Coast called Firefly. It's a 4-day camping festival in Dover, Delaware. And then we also had an online ticketing company called Event Sprout, a food and beverage company as well, and a lot of different kind of verticals within the event space.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, okay, so co-CEO of Red Frog Events and all that was under that umbrella. And then, from there, you're now the president, I believe, right, is your official title of the Wonder Museum. So again, we'll double click a little bit on a few of the stops, but high level with the Wonder Museum, what's it about? And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Wonder is a platform that integrates art, technology, and you, the guest. And we're a physical location located in the West Loop in Chicago today. Um, but as I'm sure we'll chat about more, we're in the midst of an explosive growth phase. And so we have locations opening all around the country. We have an in-house studio of artists and technologists creating mind-blowing, kind of bleeding edge installations for our guests. And then we have a community platform as well called Wonder X. And together that creates the global Wonder platform that we're building. And uh, back in the middle of the storm, doing some exciting and
yeah,
daunting things as we speak.
yeah. I always love the phrase like, what is it? Uh, Only those that are willing to go too far will know how far they can go.
Yeah,
You
I
ever heard that?
I I love that. Yes.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. Um, okay, great. So just dialing in on Red Frog here for a minute. Like the first time you told me about this and some of the willing things into existence, like
yeah,
creatively thinking about, wedding receptions as opposed to
yeah.
races, kind of thing. Like, and then I know you mentioned the Firefly Festival, and I think the first time we talked about this, I was fresh off seeing the Netflix documentary on the Fire Festival, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Two
like
two separate festivals. One extremely successful, one not so much.
exactly. So my main question, and this is where the like dream big, act small thing
Yeah.
comes in, as like me as like a risk mitigation kind of minded thinker. I was like, oh my gosh, like how did the Firefly Festival not become the Fire Festival? Like in your mind, like what are maybe I don't know, you could probably unpack this for days, but what are some key elements you think of this like dream big, act small sort of mentality that that led the way for you, I
Yeah.
guess.
Um, there were a few moments where it was very close to becoming the next Fire Festival. Um, I think it starts the BHAG. I don't know if you're familiar, big, hairy,
Uh,
audacious goals, which I think are paramount in executing any vision. You have to be bold enough to put into words what you are trying to bring to life and bring into fruition, and having the boldness to even share that with your team, to put it on paper, to challenge yourself. It starts with that, and so and then it takes a little bit of ignorance. If you fully understand what you're about to enter, no one would actually do it, because if you had the foresight to know the crazy twists and turns and challenges and headaches and hurdles, um, I think very few people would walk through those doors. Um, but it started with a simple observation. We saw that the music festival scene in Europe was far ahead of where the festival scene was in the United States. And similarly, there's so many music festivals today. Arguably we reached saturation, in my opinion, a few years ago. But at the time, there were only a couple. There was Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, Coachella. But on in the Northeast, where the majority of the U.S. population was, there's no major music festival, and that was a head scratcher to us. And so we naively said, "Hey, let's plug that hole." And you have big players in the space, the Live Nations, the AEGs, that are very territorial. And we were just a bunch of kids in Chicago, and said, well, why can't we do this? And we
yeah, I
set
mean
that.
anybody could do
Yeah,
it.
you book some bands, you sell some tickets, you put on a little music festival. And so we were good at throwing these Warrior Dash events that would be a festival for about 20,000 people. So let's crank it up and pull 100,000 people into a field with no infrastructure and
Oh my gosh.
no background in music or production. And let's do this. And so we naively and boldly saw an opportunity, and it took us on a journey. So there were a few times um, that we didn't know if it was going to happen.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know how deep you want me to go here,
Hey,
but
let's
there
go.
are a lot of
This
crazy.
it's got to be a fun story. So
Yeah,
let's go. Wait.
yeah.
So what were the times that you didn't think it was going to happen, or I'm
Well,
thinking also of like the Woodstock documentaries and things like
yeah.
that. Like there's so many things that can go the wrong way. So
Well, I'll start by saying I'm going to fast forward to according to Billboard magazine, it was the most wildly successful first year festival in U.S. history. And so that was the headline. Closed doors behind the scenes. We just lost $8 million.
mm,
We knew that first year festivals were an uphill battle. We knew that you expect a loss in year one. We knew we were taking that bold and naive leap forward, and we budgeted a $3 million loss.
mm,
The difference between 3 and 8 is pretty substantial.
yep.
And we had this incredible success with Warrior Dash that was growing at an astronomical rate. And we just produced the greatest first year music festival in American history. And we're looking in the mirror at a massive deficit. And
Yep.
so we had to make a decision for year two right then and there. Do you go all in
Yeah.
and double down on the learnings, the success, the media, the momentum, or do you cut your losses and walk?
And
Well, we know how the story ended, and once again, we boldly and naively went all in,
yep.
and year two was even a greater success. And we were able, typically, you start making money in year three,
Hmm.
is what we anticipated. And we made a little bit of money in year two, but it was enough to dig us out of the hole from the year prior. And then we were off to the races, and we had the foundations of a fantastic festival. And the Northeast finally had their festival that we knew they needed. And now just this past weekend, actually, it, Firefly celebrated its 10th year with another amazing lineup. And over the years, I've been fortunate enough to, you know, we've had everyone from Paul McCartney to The Weeknd or Mumford and Sons, Foo Fighters, some of the biggest names in music have visited Dover, Delaware, and the Firefly stage.
That is that's amazing. I love the, doubling down, going all in. I'm curious the contributing factors to that loss. Um, was it more tickets not sold, merch not sold, you know, that kind of thing, or was it like cost overruns with stuff that you didn't
Yeah,
anticipate? Like what
yeah,
the ins and outs,
yeah,
what do you think the
yeah,
major factors were?
yeah. Great question. There were two major factors. Usually, as you more eloquently stated, you must be a finance
Yeah,
professional. Uh,
I've dabbled a
uh,
little bit.
we were over on expense and substantially under on revenue, which combined. And so,
Got it.
in the music business, they call it village idiot pricing. And so, first of all, you have to overpay for bands, specifically in year one, because you don't have the credibility. You have to pay it all up front. You have to pay a little extra because you don't have that relationship. You don't have the credibility. And so, the bands are taking a little bit of a risk to perform. And so we knew that and we were willing to pay village idiot pricing, and then you outlay all of that money up front. So you might have a $6-8 million lineup before you sell a single ticket,
Mm,
and and then what we knew we needed to break even or do even better. Um, a lot of events require a history and a foundation that you build off of. And we just didn't sell the tickets that we needed to for that particular event. And so that created a nice little
gap.
hole for us.
Um, and you mentioned, like the Warrior Dash, right?
Yeah,
First of its kind. Second one you mentioned, obviously with Firefly, was like it's
yeah,
kind of crazy if you think about it that
yeah,
like a Live Nation or AEG or whatever wouldn't have been like, oh,
yeah,
well, there's a huge swath of the country that's not being
yeah,
covered. Like that, like ingenuity, that creative process, is that like an active exercise that you guys would go through, or is it like, hey, I just had this killer idea last night, or is it like campfire or retreats, or like
yeah,
how did
yeah.
all that sort of come about?
I think that's where I've been privileged to partner with some extraordinary visionaries. My brother-in-law is one of them, um, and my current business partner is another one. And there's certain minds that I'm going to refer to this visionary mind, where the ideas they can't turn it off,
Yeah,
and it is just a consistent flow of big little concepts. Um, and I think one of my personal strengths as a partner to those individuals is to act as a filter and to understand and to be able to gain clarity um, from those ideas and understand that we need to grab that one and we need to run fast and we need to build a team and execute against that one. We need to kill it immediately.
yeah,
That would be a potentially terrible outcome. And of course, I don't know anyone any better than anyone else. Um, and then these are brilliant ideas, but the timing's not right. So let's park these over here, and those could integrate into other concepts or potentially come at a different time in the journey. And so um, and so I, you know, Firefly in particular checked a lot of boxes. We wanted to go big and reinvest some of the success we had with Warrior Dash into another concept at a similar magnitude. Um, uh, and so, we looked at all of those that came before us, who tried and failed. We did have a very good grasp on that, and we came to the conclusion that those before us didn't go big enough.
Mm.
And a lot of times people will seed a concept with small act and then hope that it organically builds. And then in 10 or 15 years, you have a big festival. But in a market like the Northeast, when you're competing with New York, there's so much noise that our hypothesis was, if this is going to work, we got to come out of nowhere with a mega festival, with top tier level headliners and a premier festival site that could accommodate and ultimately become the largest camping music festival in the United States. Um, and so that's what we did. And clearly, the yin and yang of that is higher risk, higher reward, but we went for it.
I think in business schools, they teach that as the theory of go big or go home.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh no, I
Yeah.
mean, but that's anyway, that's funny. And then Event Sprout,
Yeah.
you mentioned that. Was that kind of similarly like a hey, there's no platform that's good, and so why don't we just make one? Or like or was it for your own events to a degree that you were like, hey, I want to make one custom for us, or like how did that, I guess, come about?
Yeah. Being opportunistic in regards to kind of looking at the key verticals that are your dependencies and that might be cost centers for you, and then ultimately assessing whether or not there could be an opportunity there. And so at the time we had the largest running series in the United States. Is a massive database, and we saw all the other platforms that were out there, and we saw um, that they were getting paid by us and our customers. They were getting access to our data.
Mm.
And ultimately, we felt as though the back end and sophistication wasn't as specific and custom to our specific needs as we needed. And so it started off as a simple idea of like, we can do something better. It'll provide a better customer experience and save us some resources. And so we outsourced the initial development of this platform. And then as we grew and as the platform became more and more sophisticated, we realized that our own home built solution um, could compete with uh, the big guys out there. And so ultimately that led us to acquire the development shop that built it for us,
Mm.
bring that entire team of developers in-house, and then rebuild the entire platform with the intent that, of course, we would be our own biggest customer, but then we would be able to sell it to other promoters as well and create an additional revenue stream for Red Frog.
Very neat. And I mean, when we think about all these events, the dream big, think the impossible, go big, go home.
Yeah,
You talked about, taking a visionary's idea and being like, okay, how do we break this down,
yeah,
right? Um, I love the phrase, like, how do you eat an elephant
one bite at a time.
one bite at a time, right? And obviously there's some ingenuity that comes into play with like
Yeah.
solving problems and things like that. But like, what's your sort of process for like breaking the problem down into creating a winnable game is
Yeah,
kind of the way I like to think about it, right? If
yeah,
the gigantic vision is here, how do we kind of break it down into simple elements to feel like we got a pathway towards actually executing
yeah,
on it with a little bit of luck along the
yeah.
way?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, it it starts with extreme clarity of what you're working towards. If you don't know what success looks like, if you don't know what you're building, if you're not able to communicate that to your teams, to your partners, whoever it may be, um, you're never going to reach that destination because you don't know what the destination is. And even if you get close to that destination without explicit clarity, there will be a tremendous amount of waste getting there. And so, and I think that's where what may start as a simple idea of we should launch a music festival or we should scale a specific art and technology concept, asking all of the questions for explicit clarity and that's where sitting down with my partners and just getting down to the most granular detail of, what do we want this detail to look like on opening day if this were to happen. And then once all of those details are clarified, then I ask the question, what would prevent us from accomplishing that? And usually there's massive boulders. For Firefly, we need the capital, we need a perfect site, we need bands, and we need the operational execution, which includes both production as well as traditional event. And so all of a sudden you took this massive undertaking and you compartmentalize it into your steps. So then you attack each one of those one at a time. Well, what will it take to ensure we have enough capital? And clearly the difference between the capital needs that I shared
Right.
were a bit different than what we planned for, but it still starts that conversation.
Right.
So, okay, we've secured the capital, or we have a plan to get that. Okay, how do we find the site? Okay, we have a team that looks for venues for Warrior Dash. Let's deploy them and identify 10 to 12 potential sites in the Northeast, and then I'll hop on a plane and go check these things out and see if we think they could be compelling. A band. We've never booked a band before. How are we going to get the biggest bands in the world? We need a talent buyer.
Mm.
So then let's start interviewing talent buyers and understanding who could be our partner to solve that. Production operations. Okay, let's pull in our operations team from Warrior Dash to get their expertise. But we also have a big gap with production and understanding the stage, the sound, the lights. That was a deficit. And so we need to hire a consultant, a production partner to plug that hole. Okay, so we just came up with solutions for each of those big boulders. Now,
Yeah.
are we going to do this? Yes or no? Yes. What do we have to do today? What do we have to do today to get us to tomorrow? And ultimately take one step at a time to reach that end destination. And it's an exercise that I use in all the projects that I'm involved with, and it just takes this BHAG and breaks it down into manageable pieces, understandable pieces where anyone on the team, any partner understands what their part is in pulling this off,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it very believable. If this is what you do, you're an expert in this area. All I need you to do is this small piece. And if you do that small piece, and you do that small piece, and you do that small piece, before you know it, we're going to execute something that we have no business actually executing and pulling off.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. And is this your own system, or like there's, systems out there? Like I've, worked with
Yeah.
like the 4 disciplines of execution.
Yeah.
When you start talking about boulders and rocks, there's EOS. Like, do you have anything
Yeah.
specifically you use, or is this, the Ryan Kunkel,
Yeah.
system?
When I stumbled into entrepreneurship, I was a 23-year-old environmental sciences major going down public health, no business training background, all of the concepts. It was just doing what made sense at the time. Now, fast forward, I've now gone back. I've taken executive education courses in finance, and I have mentors, and I've studied best practices for all these different things, and I've brought in partners that have expertise, and so the system has definitely matured as I've matured in my journey. But out of the gate, it was just common sense,
Yeah,
kind of
intuition.
survival to execute, and arguably another phrase, desperation breeds innovation, and I think that one has actually resonated. Once you commit, and there's a gap that you don't know how you're going to jump from point A to point B, it makes you come up with some pretty scrappy, creative solutions, like getting your wedding insurance policy so that you can advance to the next step.
I love it.
Yeah.
Um, Last thing about Red Frog that I wanted to just open the stage to is any like fun stories, or just like what are your, cocktail party,
Yeah.
stories, you know what I mean? That I'm sure you got a couple that are fun from sort of that season. But yeah,
Yeah.
fire away if you got one or two or whatever you
Yeah.
got.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I tripped into an unbelievable ride that my eyes have seen more things than I thought I'd see in a lifetime is the truth. I stumbled into this journey, and along the way, I've uh, been fortunate and unfortunate to encounter a lot of different things. Uh, you know, Professional highlight, getting the chance to hang out with Paul McCartney backstage at Firefly was a once in a lifetime opportunity. He walks up, we're in Dover, Delaware. He has his guitar around his back, he comes prancing over as a 73-year-old, the most energetic human I've ever encountered. And he just says, what did Delaware? And I was so confused. His security guard is the former head of security at the London Olympics. The guy's 10 feet tall, staring me in the eyes, and I don't know what to do. And he said, obviously in New Jersey. And then he swings his guitar around and starts playing an old Cub Scout campfire song that uses that line. And so I have moments like that that, will stay with me till the day I'm 6 feet under. Um, and then there's more traumatic experiences as well. When I talked about the success of Warrior Dash and it kind of the explosive growth that we were fortunate to experience. Um, Even more so than Firefly, there were points in that journey that we were days away from going out of business at multiple points. Specifically, we had one successful Warrior Dash in Chicago, massive success. It sold out right away. We were capped at 2,000 entries. I actually pulled the final 10 entries before they sold to throw them on eBay so that we could see the fair market value of what people were willing to pay instead of the $35 ticket that they were going for. And, people were paying $200 at the time for those last 10, which just showed and was a data point for me to see the pent up demand that we had. And so we pulled that one off, which had its own series of disasters and headaches and hurdles, but we knew we had something at that point based off that demand. So then we boldly launched 9 more across the country for the following year. And it was specifically our third event ever was outside of Dallas, in Dallas, Texas. And we found this paintball park in so sorry if I still get a little visceral reaction. And so, we're just starting to understand what we have, build a team. Uh, uh, and so we had college interns that we hired as our event directors. That was the staff that we had, a contingent workforce.
That
And
works all the time.
yeah, exactly. What
100%.
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
You sell 18,000 tickets for people to crawl through mud under real barbed wire, jump over fire, end with a big party with beer and music, and you have some very talented, hungry college students that you employ to do your permitting for you and that sort of thing. Uh, and so we found this beautiful site. We sold tickets and deferred revenue. We had launched the website. $1 million hits the bank. It was like magic. And so we submit for the permits. And this particular property was in 3 different towns, 2 different counties.
Mm.
And I raise that because permitting becomes immensely more complex when you're dealing with that many entities.
Yeah.
And so our talented college intern race director reached out to town 1. They said, that's not our problem. That's the next town's problem. Town 2, same thing. Town 3, so that's the county's problem. That county A says it's county B. And so reached out to all 5 jurisdictions. All 5 of them said, this has nothing to do with us. There's no permit you need to fill out. Just talk to the other guys. So fast forward, 2 weeks before the event, we get a letter in the mail.
Hmm.
This isn't the type of letter that you want. I didn't know anything about this. I had to reach out to a lawyer to explain to me.
Cease and desist, maybe something like.
Cease and desist would have been well received.
Okay.
I learned what a TRO is,
I.
a temporary restraining order,
Oh. Okay.
which is typically issued for murderers, rapists, and
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
of that
Right.
degree.
Yeah.
And I had never had legal issue in my life prior to that moment. I was unfamiliar with TROs. So I reach out to our local attorney here in Chicago, share the letter that we received, and she goes, "That's really bad." And so I said, "Well, that's fine. Like we just got to figure it out."
Yeah.
Well, we'll figure it out. Whatever it takes, we just got to work through this. She said, "Well, just to preface this, A, if you step foot in the state of Texas, you can go to jail immediately. And B, never in the history of the state of Texas has a temporary restraining order that's been issued by the sheriff, which this was, been overturned."
Okay.
So,
Sound like big boulders.
so those are those are mountains.
Yeah.
And so I got this great news right as the company is exploding, more success than we ever dreamed was possible as these ambitious kids that I'll call myself. Um, and so she said, "Sorry, like I can't help you. If anyone has a chance, you're going to need a team of lawyers from Texas." I had very few interactions with lawyers at that point in my life, um, uh, and so before you know it, I start calling different larger law firms in Texas, and we assemble a team of multiple attorneys. And they say, "You got to get down here. We need to get a hearing scheduled immediately to have this reviewed and see if we can get it overturned." Lawyer picks us up from the airport, drives my brother-in-law and I straight to an ATM and says, "Take out as much money as you have, because if we get pulled over at a stoplight, you could go to jail." And so
Yeah.
and um, and we went on this crazy journey. We were the ninth most Googled search term. News helicopters were over the courtroom. It was a big deal at the time. It seems bizarre that something like that would get the recognition, but it was still a very pivotal time in really uh, running as a whole, as these different concepts were um, really taking off. So I spent days in a courtroom, teams of lawyers, and we are ultimately given a list of things that if we were able to deliver on a list of seemingly impossible things, we would get our permit. And so we had 36 hours to build roads, build a helipad, find contingent plans for all sorts of things. And our ragtag group of these amazingly talented college interns pulled it off.
Wow.
And list by list, we checked the box, and we came back 36 hours with their unbelievable list of tasks completed. We got our permit. We then had our liquor license revoked, which
Oh
turned
my
into
gosh.
a whole nother slew of things. But long story long, we got our permit. If we wouldn't have gotten our permit, we would have absolutely been out of business. Um, and we were off to the races, and that was kind of the catalyst. And then that all that additional media coverage was only a boon for everything that we were building at that time.
Any press is good press. Somebody said. I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
If you pull it off, I couldn't agree more.
Oh my gosh. I did not hear that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing a couple of those. That's pretty awesome. The other thing, when we first talked professionally that I loved hearing about was how, you took all these events, right? And you were able to connect those events with purpose.
Yeah.
And, I want you to tell the story, but it involves St. Jude. But I remember you telling me about sort of the impact that it had and stuff like that. And I was just like, holy cow, like dreaming big in one way is one thing, dreaming big in another way is another. And I just thought it was awesome. So
Yeah,
why don't you hit on that a little bit?
yeah. Appreciate the opportunity. From day one, when Red Frog was created, giving back was part of the DNA. And so the first ticket we sold, money went to the Livestrong Foundation prior to Scandal.
Yep.
And so partnership with Livestrong out of the gate. And we just knew that that's the type of organization we wanted to be. And it really comes down to some basic principles. One, I believe it's the right thing to do. I think that humanity needs that. I think that it's uh, also an expectation of both your employees and your customers. And I think we're seeing that even more so right now with the purpose-driven economy. Clearly, you have announcements like Patagonia last week and other major organizations that are understanding um, uh, the value and benefits. And and I also believe, which is uh, last on the list, but it's absolutely good for your business as well. Customers want to align with organizations that have a heart, that are doing good, and making humanity better. And so we had this partnership with Livestrong, and then as we started doing these events in different cities around the country, it just became part of the tenets of what we did were to partner with a local charity in each market, and really kind of we had our national partnership, and then we would find a local partner in each respective city that we were to make an impact and leave those cities better than when we arrived. And so we had all different charities wherever we went, and then we had an event in San Diego. Um, very, very early on in our journey. I think this is 2008. And we partnered with the local St. Jude office. And it
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of a cold outreach, just saying, hey, we're going to be in town. We'd love to fundraise for your incredible mission. And so we, a local office, a local partnership in San Diego um, is where it began. And then those team members said, hey, we see you're doing events all across the country. Do you mind if I connect you with our national office in Memphis, Tennessee? That's where our hospital's located. That's where our researchers are. That's where ultimately our team is working day in and day out to cure cancer.
Mm.
And said, well, absolutely. And so we got connected with the national team in Memphis, Tennessee. They invited us to take a tour of the hospital and to see firsthand the impact that they were making. And it was one of those unexpected moments in the journey where um, when I walked through those doors, literally through those gates, my life was changed. I felt a different purpose in everything that I did. And from that day forward, we made a promise, both to ourselves and then later on formally, that everything that we do, we would use it as a platform to raise money and awareness and advance the mission of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And so it became over, so then our first year, we were able to raise, I think, $183,000 was year one. And then ultimately we were able to fundraise $16 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital to create the first ever proton therapy center to help treat children with leukemia. A lot of people don't realize a successful treatment typically has a lot of collateral damage as healthy brain cells are killed. So you might go blind in one eye, or your IQ might decrease by 15 points. And that's a success story. But with this proton beam that we are so fortunate to be able to contribute towards, it's actually so fine that you're actually able to eradicate the cancerous cells without a lot of the collateral damage that these other forms of treatment had. And so all of a sudden, this crazy curve of we're focused on building this company and scaling what we're doing, and then um, this overarching mission just hit us.
Mm.
And so from that day forward, the Red Frog and St. Jude Children's Hospital became integrated in everything that we did. And we realized that we built a platform, a community for good. And ultimately, we're able to move the needle a little bit in
Yeah.
in the journey towards uh, ultimately, which I believe wholeheartedly based off the conversations that I've seen, that I believe St. Jude Children's Research Hospital will ultimately be the place where the cure for cancer is found based off of how advanced their research facilities are.
Wow. Unbelievable. So cool. And I mean, I'm sure, and the passion is very evident, in your voice, and I could tell, even if, that part of your career, is back then the fundraising and things like that, that it's still something that you're incredibly passionate about, which is
Absolutely.
great. Um, Last stop on the journey that I wanted to hit on, president of the Wonder Museum. I and my family were
Yeah.
fortunate enough to visit. I sent you a couple of pictures 3, 4 weeks ago. We had an awesome time. Just great experience, immersive
Yeah.
experience. I don't want to like take away any of the uh, things that you'll share because you're much more familiar with it than I am. But um, maybe start with like a recap of what it is. I know we talked a little bit about it
Yeah.
at the front end, but just so people don't have to rewind, let's do that. And then obviously this is big vision time,
Yeah.
right? And I've seen some articles talking about, these other museums that you guys are going to spread out around the country and things like that. But, um, let's talk a little bit about it, what the vision is behind it, and then where you want to take it. And ultimately,
Yeah.
um, like you talked about big vision stuff, right?
Yeah.
And but like what's the why behind the big vision, right? Like what's the big picture why behind what the Wonder Museum is going to do and why you're excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. In a lot of ways, my Red Frog journey felt like the rookie who won the Super Bowl and, came into this, stumbled into this business world with this tremendous success and growth, um, not fully realizing at that time and moment how fortunate I was, both luck, experience. There's so many factors that go into any success. Um, and then I found myself at a crossroad uh, after exiting from Red Frog and spending some time on the leadership team of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in between. Um, I felt a void, and I didn't know if I'd ever get that experience again of building something um, at the pace, at the magnitude, with the excitement from the Red Frog journey. And so um, I was incredibly fortunate that my current business partner is a very successful tech entrepreneur who's gone public with some of the biggest companies in Chicago, um, had launched this place based off of his own curiosity and his own love of technology and art and the intersection that those two could play with each other. And so, as a hobby, he launched a space in the West Loop neighborhood called the Wonder Museum.
mm,
And it was launched as a pop up temporary experience in the fall of 2018. And it got a tremendous success out of the gate, a lot of interest, a lot of momentum. Uh, but then it kind of went through a few different iterations, trying to find out what it was, what space it played in, and ultimately it didn't have that explicit clarity
mm,
on what it could become. And and so my partner knew that he had something special on his hands and that it was ripe to make a bigger impact and to scale. Um, uh, and he needed someone to partner with him to complement his exceptional skills to kind of take this concept to the next level and beyond. And so I joined as a partner, and I saw all the potential and the foundation that had been laid. And so Wonder is an art and technology experience that's incomplete without you, the guest. And so Wonder as a whole encompasses three main verticals. We have physical space, which is currently in the West Loop today, but I'm ecstatic to share that we have three more locations under construction as I speak in San Diego, Seattle, and Boston. And we have many more locations that will be opening beyond that. And then we have a Wonder Studios team, which consists of artists and technologists that both build, create, and partner with artists and technologists around the world to create unbelievable installations. And then we have Wonder X, which is a platform for collaborations and doing amazing things in the world, specifically around advancing STEAM and STEM education for youths that may not have access to some of the resources or experiences that that we're fortunate enough to be exposed to. And so this experience, which was just in Chicago, is now we're in the hyper growth phase, which is incredibly exciting and daunting. And we find gaps in the plan every single day, which I love challenging our team and rolling up our sleeves to jump over those.
And so in each location, will they be some familiar elements, some, custom, unique elements, um, different pieces of art in different places? Um, I know the universal, you know, um, characteristics, like you were saying, it has to be immersive with the person doing it. But
Yeah,
like, what would people expect if they've been to, say, a Chicago one and went to a San Diego one
yeah,
or whatever?
yeah. The experiences at each location are different, but have some similar tenets. So my partner has a very extensive art collection with some of the most iconic pieces from people like Yayoi Kusama, Keith Haring, Barbara Kruger, um, others. And so we're fortunate to be able to share pieces from that collection and showcase those in our various locations around the country. And then um, I'm fortunate to have as a creative partner, you talk about the gaps in the plan, and it became very evident. I'm not an artist, just like I didn't know anything about booking bands or the technical production side.
Right.
I needed a partner. We're in the art and technology space. I know how to build great organizations and create a compelling experience, but I needed that expertise. I needed that partner, and so I'm very fortunate to have an amazing artist as my partner. And so he has a team within Wonder Studios that is currently building, curating those spaces with some of the most mind-blowing pieces. And so everything is going to the next level with the type of experiences that we'll be able to offer in these new ones. And ultimately, a lot of those installations will be brought to Chicago as well, using the latest AI technology where you can ideate different concepts and pieces of art will come to life before your eyes, um, and various other installations as well.
Very neat. Well,
Yeah,
you touched on this a little bit, or what hit my mind when you said it is that, art, and you mentioned STEAM,
yes,
you know what I mean?
yes,
Then usually, like, there's a disassociation there
yeah,
between like left brain, right brain kind of thing.
yeah,
So it's kind of cool that, your thought process as an organization is around like, how do we bring these things together, right?
yeah,
So I love that, connection. What does that look like in terms of your engagement with the community?
yeah,
Um, what is that, practically, how does that play out
yeah,
now, but also there may be different things down the road.
yeah. You, I I hope you can sense my excitement about this because this is similar to the passion that I had for St. Jude and seeing um, Red Frog as a platform to raise funds and awareness for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We now have a classroom that we're building. Clearly, we have one in Chicago that's active today, and we'll have essentially a footprint of these brick and mortar places around the country very, very soon. And so there are so many different ways that we are able to leverage that platform in order to elevate STEAM education across the US. As simple as we actually will pay reimburse schools for the buses and offer free field trips for those kids. And we have a series of activities for those students to participate in before, typically most mornings before we open. We have this space that we're able to leverage in that way. And then there's some more sophisticated, more robust things that we have in the works as well. University of Southern California, um, the Iveen Young Academy, Jimmy Iveen and Dr. Dre are most well known for starting the Beats headphones and some other things. They actually created a college at the University of Southern California specifically around design, the arts, technology, entrepreneurship, because their premise is that academia today doesn't prepare the workforce for the future
Yep.
in terms of all the various fields that we know are booming, and a lot of the traditional methods of teaching are a little antiquated for some of these fields. And so they've said, we want to create the most progressive college that prepares college students for the careers of tomorrow. Clearly, we embody
Yeah.
all of those elements that they're focused on. And so actually, as we speak, as we sit here today, there's a college course that was co-created between IYA Academy as well as Wonder Museum. And we have a group of unbelievable talented students that are actually building curriculum for us that we will then be able to share with high school students and below that can use our physical spaces as a classroom to advance STEAM education around the US and eventually around the globe. And so partnerships like that, you know, I was fortunate enough, I was able to join in via Zoom on Friday for 2 hours and hear the brilliance and the passion. And so that's another exciting element to what we're building, what we're creating, and ultimately the way we'll be able to impact the community in a huge way.
Very neat. I've seen videos about that
Yeah.
college and just like sort of the immersive,
It's
way of doing it, kind of threw away
yeah.
the textbooks, and I don't know everything about it, but like I loved, um, sort of the vision behind it. And you could tell by the students in the video at least that they were like, this is awesome. It kind of made me want to go there, honestly,
I
because I was thinking about there's times where I'm like, think of myself as a creative person that doesn't know how to create anything.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I can't draw, I can't sing a
Yeah.
song, I can't play music, I can't do any of that,
Yeah.
but I can see it. You know what
I
I
think
mean?
you're more creative I think you have more skills than you're giving yourself credit for.
Well,
Yeah.
well, thank you, thank you. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, I guess it looks amazing, and that's awesome that you guys
Yeah.
were partnered up with that.
I feel on multiple fronts. I appreciate IYA Academy as the pioneer that they are, as really being a blueprint for the future of academia, as well as being an incredible partner for us to leverage the foundation we've built to provide more access uh, and exposure to these students in science, technology, engineering, arts, math.
Awesome. Well, I will end with the traditional three questions here at the Drive By Entrepreneur podcast. Um, this is just fun.
All
There's
right.
no right or wrong answers. Um, but the first question is your favorite podcast, and I always make the disclosure that it's besides this one.
Yeah. My
So,
second favorite
yes, thank you.
podcast is How I Built This, NPR.
Ah,
It clearly I can appreciate um, what those entrepreneurs have overcome to build what they've built.
last episode, my guest flipped the script on me unexpectedly and said, "Well, what is your favorite podcast?" And How I Built This was the first one that was out of my mind. But um, I like in general sort of that long form, interview. Like, how did this happen? How did this happen? I just get a lot of inspiration from it, and that's why it's great to do this. And
Yeah.
thankful for having you here. Um, okay, this is a different one given your experience. But best concert you've ever
Yeah.
been to, and you can't play the Paul McCartney played the joke on me thing,
Yeah.
like whatever. No, but what do you think? I mean, what's kind of your best concert experience? And
I'm
you've had a few of them.
I'm definitely a bit biased on this one.
Yeah.
It, it was a show at Firefly, but it was actually the first time I saw the Foo Fighters,
Mm.
and I got to see the genius that David Grohl is, um, and just one of the best shows I've ever seen. After they rapped, they came back out as a cover band and did some really well-known covers of some of my favorite artists, and it was just a show I'll never forget.
Amazing. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to see them yet. Not that
Yeah,
they're,
well,
I know they may get back on the road. We'll see what happens. I hope they do.
yeah,
But I have not had the opportunity to see them yet. So
definitely worth making that happen.
absolutely. Okay, last question. A place that you've been that everyone should visit once,
I,
traveling wise.
I hope everyone walks through those doors at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Ooh,
It,
love that.
there, there's no place on earth that's been more impactful for me, and I think uh, the world would be a better place if more people walk through those doors.
Do you know if that is an option for people? Like if they were in, Memphis or whatever, that they would be able to do that?
I know that they're building a new visitor center that makes it more accessible uh, to learn about the mission of St. Jude and what's happening on that campus and the pioneers that they are in the fight against cancer and other diseases. So, yes, there's definitely a public experience that you can have there. But I'm also sure that there's a local office here in Chicago if this is where you're based or anywhere around the country, um, to reach out to your local office, and if you wanted to go visit, I'm sure they would accommodate and be happy to host.
Amazing. Well, I have learned a ton, been inspired a ton. Um, Great to unpack this even more. I know we talked
Yeah.
about it kind of passively in the past, but I think that people are going to get a real treat if they tune in and watch or listen. And very grateful for you. Appreciate it. And obviously, wish you and your partners and everybody at the Wonder Museum great success. And based on our conversation, I don't think there's much of a doubt that it's going to happen. So
Uh,
go get them.
I appreciate the opportunity. Always a great chatting.
All right.
Yeah.
Great to see
Thank
you,
you.
bud. Thank you.